If life is indeed a fight, as long as you are still breathing, there is still a chance to win a veteran agent. Lives a boring life in the field for years undercover, fighting and catching criminals, but he is still trapped in his past, losing a woman he loved 15 years ago. Then the opportunity brings him back to the country, full of memories, to take care of the case and hunt down international white-collar and the person who gave him the information about the gangster's crime shocked him, and he finally met the woman from his past again. He ran, being hunted and chased on the streets of Taipei City to save his family again. Long gone. This movie is full of car chases on the street, gunfights and fistfights spread by luck. Even some can watch Angji Ulumi and Pernal Walker. Without further ado, let's go take the capital of Taiwan. The High Court is very crowded, and a crowd gathered in front of him. The trial of the chairman industries began in the High Court today. The trial was the culmination of a year-long investigation. The Kwang Industries Company was charged with illegal fishing and causing the death of many dolphins, endangering the marine ecosystem. The chairman of Kwang committed interview with media and expressed his apology in front of the media. Kwang to prove that he was innocent of all charges and immediately got into his car. His lawyer was waiting and explained about the case, offered some solutions, but Kwang felt it was useless and threw his lawyer out of the car. Kwang was curious. He wanted to know who had been dismantling his business all this time. Someone inside who had brought down his business. Then Kwang called his wife. Name was Jo, but she didn't pick up as Kwang was busy with his problems. Jo's wife was busy shopping without caring about her phone ringing. So Jo went to a luxury car dealer. His attention was drawn to Mr. P's red Ferrari marketing officer, who was on duty immediately. Ferrari 488 Pista Spider was the most beautiful and expensive car in the room. Jo saw the engine and wanted to try it. He got into the car and started the engine. It turned out that Jo was very skilled at. He drove around the city at high applause. This woman is a professional driver. The staff who accompanied her were scared, and they went back to Sean. Jo was going to buy it. The dealer supervisor for a moment, but when he saw Jo, immediately smiled. Jo is the wife of the richest conglomerate in Taiwan. The supervisor said that his car would be ready in 1 hour. This is the weekend in tape. Jo immediately brought the car. He just arrived home. He lives in a luxury pension in the middle of the city. Was also waiting for his wife to arrive. Warmly and chatted with him. Kwang told him about the accusations. He doubted that someone inside was working on him. Jo asked who might have reported him. Kwang was also this issue could come out in the media. Kwang suspected him. Kwang denied that it was impossible. Jo showed the car he had just bought as a birthday present, saying Jo remember his birthday. Kwang felt guilty and said, "Thank you." The issue that hit Kwang had a big impact on the industry's shares. His company plummeted to its lowest point. Jo knocked on a room and entered. It was his son Raymond. When he married Kwang, Jo had given birth to Raymond, and this boy really hated his adoptive father. Kwang, destroyer of the ecosystem in the Taiwanese was a jerk. Raymond had his things and was getting ready to. Raymond goes to explain to his mother that he doesn't want to be in Kwang's house while man is in prison. Rayan invites his mother to run away. He wants to Paris on an ocean liner. Tries to stop him and convinces him to stay, even though Jo knows that Raymond never liked his adoptive father. The reason Jo married Dulu, he really needs help from Kwang. Jo tries to cheer up his son and promises to take Raymond to Paris next weekend. Then suddenly Raymond, his biological father, His biological father was a pastry chef and died in a car accident. Joe feels that he doesn't need to tell him about it. Then it won't change. The present Raymond agrees to be patient and wait for his mother in Minneapolis, America. A man in a chief's uniform is held up by the police. He is asked to surrender. This man is named John Laird. John's appearance is very messy and he also doesn't fight back. Arrested a woman named Charlotte. He was angry and asked the police to remove the handcuffs. He was an undercover agent and told the officers to leave. Charlotte asked John's condition and where his partner, Santiago, was. John said Santiago was fine. Not long after, medical officers carrying Santiago, who was seriously injured. Charlotte immediately asked what happened and John told him that he and Santiago had been undercover as chiefs in this restaurant for 6 months. They were monitoring shipments of goods sent by Kang Industries in Taiwan. They were recording evidence of the shipment. Santiago's badge accidentally fell and was caught by the courier Quang, who was passing by. This man was angry and asked if it was his. The agent tries to evade. These people take the knife. John tries to lie and just a fake badge, and John attacks. The fight is inevitable and Santiago gets hit several times. Accidentally music. The first group is finished off. Wants to take Santiago out. The second group comes and the brawl continued. With kitchen utensils there, John held his ground and knocked these men down. These men still wanted to attack him. John asked for time, let him drink first, and then it continued once again. Santiago had bad luck and the third group came back to beat Baba. Begins. John does not hesitate to finish off these people. He splashes them with water and John burns him. He immediately goes out and throws himself into the aquarium in the middle of the restaurant. Customers in the restaurant panic, scatter outside. John intends to escape and takes Santiago, but he sees the courier outside. Interrogate him first, leaving Santiago in the kitchen, but it turned out that the fire was still burning and spread to the area, which was covered in oil and alcohol. Santiago could only surrender. John worked to die and asked the courier from Crank Industry where he brought the goods. John had to torture people. This is so that he opens his mouth several times. Hey, other friends come in and shoot him. This person runs away. Is on fire. The automatic fire alarm still has time to save a small fish. And that's what happens next. The police come and want to arrest him. John invites Charlotte to see the crime scene. It was already in ruins. Even though John was unable to arrest Quang Industry courier, he managed to get evidence that Quang Industry was bringing drug dealers through the fish rings that they sent to restaurants, and that made Charlotte happy. Charlotte immediately announced the findings media. They had found almost 400 kilos of hero, estimated to be worth $300 million. Charlotte announced that her team would look for the mastermind behind drug distribution. They would not be able to run away and they would hunt them down. News was immediately shown to Kang by her employees who were playing golf. Their belongings in America were discovered, which of course made Quang very angry. Meanwhile, Joe returned home after spending the day shopping. When Joe finished taking a shower, he was surprised by the arrival of Quang. Quang him and wanted to make up for it. He invited Joe on vacation. Joe agreed to his invitation, even though Kwang had married to Joe for almost 15 years. Still felt that Joe can't love her yet, and accepting it completely, Kang begged Joe to give him a chance. Joe just stayed in the office. Agent John continued to dig up information about the Kwang Industrial Company, found that the Kwang Company was involved in illegal fishing and netting and destroying the dolphin ecosystem in Taiwan. Reported his findings to Charles. Charles already knows about the case involving Kwang Industry, feels that this evidence is not enough to ensnare them, especially also in another country. Tries to convince them that the evidence can be the beginning to ensnare Kong. He also said that there was an informant sent him a message. He could give him the ledger. Charlotte not sure about the informant that John found, especially since it was in Taipei. Someone it is impossible that would betray him. John remains firm and wants to meet his informant who is in Taipei. Charlotte forbids, especially since he experienced something 15 years ago and it had a big impact to him, but John was very sure he could catch Kwang. He just needed permission and kept trying to persuade his boss, Charlotte, to refuse him. He gave John a leave letter he couldn't send an agent to take, yet he asked John to go on vacation, relax, go to the beach, and start a relationship with a girl, but stubborn John instead used his vacation time to investigating Kwang in tape. He actually went to Taiwan. John used a fake identity under the name George Washington and pretended to be on vacation. He boarded the plane. This was going to be a long trip. Meanwhile, Raymond went to Kang's office to look for a pencil sharpener in the room. He saw a suspicious iron rhinoceros display. When he wanted to see it more clearly, Kwang went in there. Kwang actually tried to get closer to Raymond and invited him to play golf together, but Raymond kept refusing. This made Kwang annoyed. He had tried his best, but why did Raymond hate him? Raymond quiet and leave from there. At that time, Joe was enjoying the morning news of the arrival of the American volleyball team who would be playing against Taiwanese team. He accidentally saw a person appear briefly on the news. Was watching. Even though the man was passing by, he made sure it was a man. From the man's past is John Lela, who is Joe's ex-boyfriend. Past memories flashed through his head. Joe was very pretentious. Why did John return to Taipei? At the airport, John was picked up by his agent D, who was on duty in Taiwan. This man was named Simon. He greeted John and this man Freddie. They immediately left, heading to the Marriott Hotel where they were staying. Entered their room. The three of them had prepared their complete weapons for hunting Kang. They are interested in helping John because if this is successful, they can return to the main office in America. Moreover, there is an informant who will send Kang's ledger, so this is a great opportunity for these two agents. The delivery time is still 5 p.m. There is 1 hour. They will eat and shower. Meanwhile, Joe remembered his past again. He saw an old photo of him. Kang suddenly came to him and invited him to his office. In Rayam's office, his son was being beaten by Kang's right-hand man named Bolo. Joe was by the situation that had occurred, asked Bolo to come to his office. Said something surprising that Rayam was the one who had reported him and sold the information so that his dark business discovered and had an impact on the company. Joe didn't believe Kwang gave evidence. He showed a video of Raymond stealing his ledger. Kwang asked Rayon to return the book, but Rayon refused. Kwang's company destroyed the dolphin ecosystem and damaged the marine order. He has something. Kwang can't believe this kid did it for the dolphins. This guy is very upset. The ledger is proof of all his dark transactions. There is a lot of evidence. Joe asked Kang for permission to talk with Raymond and persuaded him. Kwang allow him. Joe asked Raymond to be honest with him and tell him everything. Raymond whispered, telling him what he had done, asking his mother to buy him 5 minutes. Raymond had contacted an agent named John Lera from Dar. He had sent a courier to deliver the ledger to the agent. Hearing the name John was called Raymond, increasingly confused about how his son knew the. What was he talking about? Chose to believe his son. He time for 5 minutes. Joe put on and asked Kang to hit him so that Raymond would confess, but Kwang didn't want to. He couldn't hit Joe because Kwang didn't want Joe letting out complaints. So far, Raymond tried to free himself from Joe's bonds, complaining about the cigarette smoke here, but it was nothing compared to Kang's body odor. As long as he was married, that was what he could endure. The smell could never go away and made one of Mrs. Kwang's children laugh, who was emotional, finished off his men. And it was almost 5 minutes. Meanwhile, the courier had arrived at the hotel. Kwang started to get his gun at the rayon. He had to talk. Joe was being held by Kang's men. The 5 minutes that the rayon needed. Finally, he talked. Ledger sent to Hotel Marriott in the room 2018. Don't hurt his mother. Kwang sent all his employees to the location that Rayon had told them. They all moved. There was only one person and Kang back. He would punish Raymond. He took the collection to his land. Raymond was guilty of betraying the family. He would take one of his legs. Raymond could rest assured buy him an expensive prosthetic leg. Joe didn't know how to knock down the man who was holding him down. Finish this man off. Joe immediately pointed the gun at Kang and asked him to let go of his son. Kwang wasn't afraid and instead approached Ray, who had already broken free. Iron Rhino statue with an Kwang immediately fainted. Joe immediately got into a red Ferrari. Glided. He didn't expect his mother to be at driving, and Kwang came to from his fainting spell. He was very angry to release his handcuffs. Kwang's troops, led by Bolo, had entered. John and his friends, who were relaxing and eating in the room, suddenly heard the sound of the bell. Became alert. It turned out that there was no one outside, and John only found a red book. The book was Wang's ledger, which contained information about his business. John didn't think that everything informant said was true. He sent the book. John immediately took all the contents of the book as backup evidence. While outside, Bolo and his troops had arrived in front of room 2018. His men immediately took out their weapons. At the same time, John's room also rang the bell, and his men were in the wrong room. Bolo immediately called his boss. The boy had lied. There was nothing here. Kwang asked Bolo to check all the hotel rooms. Joe and his son arrived at Luckily they had a fight with Bolo and his men, and suddenly there was a knock on John's door. They were alert, and John looked through the hole. John didn't expect to see a woman from his past. He opened the door. Didn't expect to meet like this. John very confused why this woman is here. Raymond is busy asking who this man is. Joe tells his son to be quiet. Tells John about Kang, who after him, but John has a lot of questions in his head and needs time to process them. He hasn't seen Joe for 15 years. John is very shocked to hear that Joe has married to Ang. Raymond is also confused by his mother's reaction. Get to know each other. In the middle of the argument, Bolo is already on the floor and immediately attacks. The shooting action cannot be avoided. John asks Joe and Ray to hide in the bathroom. These people shoot at the bedroom door. Music. Because I have found John. Bolo reports his findings. Bolo to bring Joe back and kill anyone who gets in the way, including his son, and Simon becomes the first victim. These people enter and kill some of Kang's men. But Freddy faces too many people, and he also becomes a Bolo manages to find the ledger, and now they just need to get Joe. John throws his smoke grenade and they are showered with gunfire. Music. Again, the explosive grenade is thrown. The three of them managed to escape through the back way. John takes Joe and Raymond with him. John shoots them, escape through the emergency stairs and breaks the door before going down. Bolo and his men were very upset that the door could not be opened and tried to break it down. Many police officers had come because of the chaos that had occurred at the hotel. To Taipei with a fake identity was not allowed to be caught by the officers, forced to hide in a bar to avoid the officers, but John was still there, curious what really happened because John kept asking about Raymond. Is he Joe's son? Finally, he admitted introduced the two of them. They were father and son. John was immediately shocked and no less shocked. Rayon said that his father had died. Both confused, but they couldn't stay there for long. Here they decided to go from the hotel, and it turned out they were recognized by the police captain who had checked the CCTV. The police chased them, and they ran away and immediately got Ferrari, and Joe drove it. Joe said that Kwang knew all the police officials. They had to be able to escape, and this captain got John's identity. They were surprised. The name really true? This guy is Joe's his driving skills to avoid the police, and Raymond keeps complaining about his biological father, whom he deliberately took cooking class to feel closer to his father. It turns out that was a lie. Asks them to be quiet. Joe, he wants to focus on a chase takes place inside, and it turns out that Jay was shot and had to be rushed to the hospital, but John refused. He couldn't reveal his identity, so Joe had an idea. He crashed his car into a food courier's and he gave his car to the courier to cover his tracks. Bolo went to see his boss and handed over the ledger that he had found. Kwang ordered him to find Joe, his wife, by any means. Kang asked the hacker to hack the city's CCTV and look for the red Ferrari Joe was driving, and finally the police managed to find the red Ferrari, but arrested the one was a different person. Gave his car to this courier. The courier was arrested by the police. This person shouting he was innocent and knew nothing. John, Joe and Raymond had on the train when it stopped. They went to a parking lot. They hijacked a car to escape. John had to beat up the officer who caught them. Raymond still couldn't believe what his mother had done. She looked like a professional. Were they really his parents? John asked Raymond to be quiet in the car immediately, and they immediately from there left. During the trip, John tried to talk to Joe about their past and why Joe never told him she was pregnant and had Raymond. Joe replied that John never gave him a chance to talk. John didn't understand what he said. Joe was not the right time, reminisce about the past. Now what they need is a plan to get out of the problem that John has created. But John chooses to sleep. That action makes Jube annoyed at him, cursing him in Mandarin. John just smiles. It reminds him of the past. They finally arrive at a small hospital at Seaside to treat John's wound. It turned out John had lost a lot of blood, so he needed a transfusion. Luckily, Raymond's blood type was the same as John. Asked Joe about Raymond's condition. That Raymond was fine, was lying on the bed next to them, and they continued to argue about the past, especially never tell him that she is pregnant with Raymond and ends up marrying. Joe asks John to stop arguing because John doesn't understand what happened to his life before. Raymond had been awake and secretly listening to his conversation. Finally, Joe found out. The doctor entered the room. They thanked Joe for all this time. Joe was the only donor at the village hospital. With this hospital was built, has many facilities and can help many people. The children say thank you to Joe, but they had to leave there immediately and said goodbye. They continued their journey to Joe's house in a village on the coast, and they arrived at the house on the coast of his grandmother, called Popo. Was very surprised Joe's arrival. Popo was very especially happy when he saw Raymond, but John was not welcomed well by Popo. Checked the house. There was even a modified car in the house. He was amazed and couldn't believe that his mother had grown house in. He was very happy that the house why was didn't his mother bring him here. Pupujo also came there to deliver their food. They spent dinner together. Raymond was still processing all the things that happened. This was too sudden, asking Joe to tell him everything. Don't cover anything up because Raymond also has the right to know. Joe was willing to tell. Joe also told his story about his parents died at sea. That's why he lives with Popo. Because of his parents' tragedy, Popo forbade Joe from going near water. Joe looked for something else to do, and it turned out that Joe was talented at being. He was also a car driver and could even build his own modified car. Until one day something bad happened in the village. The villagers found packages of drugs that were smuggled. Asked the villagers not to report their findings to the police. They would definitely be being suspects. Decided to keep the drugs. Until one day the gang involved with the drug boy came and wanted to take the drugs back. But when they got there, they didn't find taking the drug boy but also kidnapping young girls in the village. Joe's grandmother, who saw the arrival early of the morning, immediately woke Joe up. Joe jumped into his car, immediately went and drove the car for him and ran away. The gang did not accept it, chased him. A chase ensued, long chase between Joe and the gangsters. Finally passes hand to escape to the street. But in the end Joe was still caught. He was surrounded and finally offered a job as a driver for the gangster's drug delivery boy. Then Joe asked John to tell his story. Ray asked how they both met. At first John refused him to be honest. Joe asked. Finally John agreed to tell his story. John started. At that time he was carrying out his work duties. He was a police officer agent, and he was assigned to a mission in Taiwan at that time. He was to track down a shipment of drug boys in tape, and John pretended to be a client, following a car carrying drug boys, and it turned out that the driver of the car. Initially Joe thought that John was his competitor who wanted to steal his goods. They chased him until finally John realized the driver was a woman, and he fell in love with this girl. At first sight his focus was diverted. Their car shifted and John's car overturned, and Joe immediately rushed to help him to give first aid, giving CPR, artificial respiration. That was their first kiss. That's how they met, but John remembers a lot of romantic events happened after that, the second, the third, and the next. Raymond felt that his parents were very harmonious. He didn't understand how they could separate. But they didn't answer him and went arguing and blaming each other because they each had their own reasons. Rayon those who were annoyed to hear them to stop, so they ended the meeting and rest. Tonight, the next day, John looked for Joe, but he didn't find him. He decided to accompany Raymond, who was peeling edam beans. They became quite close and chatted about many things. John heard a loud noise from the garage. Joe had returned. John approached him. Joe had just returned from the city to looking for spare parts to fix his car. John reminds Joe to be careful. They are being chased. Joe asks John not to worry, but John is still curious about the past that he might have missed at first. Joe doesn't want to remember old memories, and finally Joe decides to tell Joe wants John, remembering the moment when they met for the last time. They promised to go on a date at a restaurant. Joe was very happy to arrive there. They both had a secret that they had to tell. Joe asked John to tell it first. John then revealed his true identity. He was Agent Dai, who had been spying on Matai Kwang so far. Joe had to feel used by John. John admits that at first he used Joe, but in the end he really fell in love with him. But now his boss also wants to make Joe a suspect with Kwang. They need someone to blame. John doesn't want this woman arrested, telling her to leave from there, even though he really wanted to be with. Unfortunately, they had to separate. But John's story was not as Joe remembered. Joe really wanted that John will become a father. It turns out he didn't have time to give the news and was forced to run away from there, and he cried in his car. John was very shocked. He just found out about it. Joe should have told him about the good news that day. If he had known, he wouldn't have asked Joe to go with them, both sacrificing many things since that day. They both suffered since then. Joe sacrificed his life and married Kwang, and John sacrificed his woman. He Mas is still alone now, but until now they love each other, even though they haven't met for a long time. More secrets between the two, and decided to try again. This couple got back together. Meanwhile, Kwang was still replaying the CCTV footage when Joe and Raymond escaped from the hotel, and his phone rang. His lawyer said that deputy from the police wanted to talk to him about the shooting at the Marriott Hotel. Kwang hung up. Call him back to the bathroom and check something. Open Joe's bag and find the photo that Joe other saw, day, and he found the fact that Joe still often looks at his past with John. His anger is getting worse. Kwang goes to meet Naipu Tilu, who is waiting for him in the office to discuss the shooting at the Marriott Hotel. Kwang did not accept that the police blamed him. The incident at the hotel when his employees were no longer on working hours, do whatever they want. Kwang blames the police. The perpetrator who killed 6 of his bodyguards, not George Washington, Agent John Leller. John has been targeting him for a long time. This is the person who his wife and child. The police to investigate this. Arrest him immediately, and Kwang left them on the way back to the car. Bolo reported that they didn't find Joe in Taiwan, ordering him to check Joe's hometown village. Meanwhile, they were both in the room. Suddenly, Raymond came knocking on the door. Joe immediately pushed John. The door opened the room. Raymond asked where John. Joe told his son maybe John was out exercising. Raymond said he would apologize to his father. He was rude yesterday, then went to look for him outside and accidentally John found the passport and money that Joe had hidden there. Joe said it was money for the escape. They had prepared it, and after that John and Joe had a serious talk with Rayon. They needed stronger evidence to trap Kang. The ledger wasn't enough. Then remembered the rhinoceros display in Kang's room. It could be that the display contained a hard disk. They just needed Raymond offered to steal it, but was forbidden by the 2 men, his parents, because it was dangerous. Rayon did not accept it. Wanted to help, he immediately left. Next day, 2 Kwang members went to Joe's grandmother's house. One of them got out of the car. The other one got out of downstairs. When he saw Joe, John immediately killed the one on top. This person wanted to report to Kang. The gun was already at his head. He didn't report it. John went straight inside and asked Joe to hurry up and leave. Their hideout had been discovered when they wanted for Rayon. This bossel had already disappeared. He even borrowed his cousin's motorbike. It turned out he had already come to Kang Raymond's residence, wanted to take Kang's drive, which was inside the rhino statue, but he was caught by Kang, and the 2 of them immediately left in the car. Joe immediately suspected Raymond was there, and Kang replied that he wanted Joe back. Took over the phone to negotiate with Kang to exchange him with Rayon. Kang said he wanted John gone Forever don't bother him and his wife. John said they will meet in the middle of the city in the American Alley area. Then hung up. Joe asked why he did this. They will finish him. John calmed Joe down. Trust him. They arrived at meeting location and immediately got off in front of Kang with some of his men. They had already surrounded. He showed Rayon in the car, but Kang did not keep his agreement. Kang instead wanted to tell about his past with Joe when they met, and this is what happened. The boss of the drug dealers in the past was Kang. Kang came to Joe's grandmother's house to get his lost goods, and his members managed to catch Joe and bring him to. It turned out that Joe had hit Wang's best driver when he first escaped, and this person died. He wanted Joe to replace this person. This girl was very skilled. She offered Joe to, but Joe didn't want to. Think that Kwang had killed his grandmother. Luckily, his grandmother was fine. Okay, Kwang promised as long as he worked with him, he would give him a decent life and take care of his family, and Kwang immediately pulled Joe and took Joe and told John on the deal had changed. He asked his men to finish off John. Kwang left from there. John was very fast. He finished off all his men, Kang, and rushed to chase Kang's car. John aimed his gun and shot Bolo, who was carrying the car. He was killed, and the Kwang drove the car and fled from there. John continued to chase Kang, still driving the car angrily, cursing Joe and his son. Music. John finally found that and jumped, kicking Kwang out. The mother and son were very shocked. Raymond said Kwang brought the drive from the Buddha statue. Kwang immediately ran away after making sure his family was safe. John went back to look for Kwang. Disappeared. He passed the arcade game and he found traces of Kang coming back to chase him. Looking around, seeing someone being hit, Kwang ran to the cinema and he found Kwang in the theater, asking him to surrender. The audience immediately ran out, seeing John holding a gun, except for a pair of grandfathers interested in seeing what was happening. Was fed up with being chased. He had no intention of escape. That his problem with John not related to his criminal problems. Their problem is more personal. John has taken Joe away from him. He can't even take care of his own child. Kwang challenges John to shoot him. John drops his gun, choosing to duel with music. Kang. They exchange blows and calms each other down, who were both equally emotional. They brought each other down. Until finally Kang fell and John pointed his gun at him again, asked to just finish him off, but John replied that he would be punished first and made him faint. This grandfather was very happy. Exciting brawl. Finally, Kang was arrested by the police. All the evidence, the crime that imprisoned him, he couldn't avoid again. The media is busy reporting his arrests, as well as John. He was handcuffed in the middle of the office. Officer Liu met him, freed his handcuffs. There was someone who bailed him out. John entered the room. The video call was Charlotte. Charlotte immediately had John because of trouble he had caused in tape. These people asked a very expensive ransom for him. He asked a vacation, and instead he messed up. John wanted for his mistake. The drive he had found contained all the crimes he had committed. Charlotte didn't get angry. His work was good, but he really had to take a vacation. He was suspended for 3 months, then hung up the call. Deputy Liu asked John wants to leave Taipei as soon as possible to return his passport. John is finally free from custody. He goes to see his family. John invites them to go on vacation with him. He has free time now. Raymond is very happy, but Joe refuses the invitation because Raymond is still John also persuades women. In the end, they still go vacation Paris, spending time together making up for lost time. Raymond is very happy his parents are together. Again, Joe gives John the good news that she is pregnant. John is shocked and can't believe this. They have only been in Paris. He is very happy. John finally brings his family to America. Joe gives birth there and Raymond has a younger brother, women, and this film ends. Hopefully you are entertained watching this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch this channel. If you like and are entertained this video, please press the like, subscribe button and turn on the bell. Hopefully we all stay healthy and happy. We will see you again in the video. Bye.